Hey everybody, it's Scott Brown here on day 45 of Darren LaCroix's 90-day Facebook Live Challenge. We're halfway home, halfway through the 90-day challenge, and we're starting to come out of our deep freeze here in the Midwest. Thank goodness. But as we start to come out of the deep freeze, I started to think today had some time as I was shoveling snow again, and started to think today about something that I used to hear my grandmother say that I haven't heard in a long time, but I think is very applicable to something going on that's kind of a trend that's happening right now. My grandmother had this great saying of, just because the boots are in the oven, it don't make them biscuits. Just because the boots are in the oven, it don't make them biscuits. Now, she wasn't trying to say that she was such a bad cook that she put boots in the oven and they were going to taste like biscuits. What she was saying is that just because you want something to be a certain way doesn't mean that it is. Just because you want to call something something doesn't mean that it's actually that thing. And I think it's relevant today for a big reason. Over the past few years, there's been this large upswing of companies that are offering digital onboarding services for new employees. It's a booming market out there, and I think the product that they have is incredibly helpful to organizations, to new employees, to help the efficiency, bring somebody on board, to help start that process off on a very positive level by showing the level of technology that your organization has. It does a lot of good things. There's only one problem. It's not onboarding. It'll never be onboarding. There's a difference between what onboarding is and what orientation is. Orientation is that process that a new employee goes through to get acclimated to everything that's around them within an organization. It's the tour of the building, so you know where the bathrooms are located. It's the introduction to your benefits, so you know when you can sign up, what's going to be covered, what's not going to be covered, how much it's going to cost. It's where to park, it's how to dress, it's getting the security badge, it's learning how to use the systems that you need, getting the passwords that you need to get onto your computer. All of that is incredibly important, but it's not onboarding. It's orientation. It's orienting somebody to the job that they have decided to take. Onboarding, on the other hand, is starting those relationships that you have with people so that you can start to become effective in what you do. Onboarding is about one-on-one connections between a new employee, their team, their manager, their customers, the market, everyone they're going to deal with, and helping them find the relationships within their company that are going to allow them to be successful. Orientation is about the process. Onboarding is about the relationship. And they're incredibly important and they work together, but they're different. And just because you want to call something one thing doesn't mean that it is that thing. As my grandmother would say, just because the boots are in the oven, it don't make them biscuits. Now, I want you to think about onboarding and orientation kind of in a very visual way. So back in the early 2000s, I want to say it was the winter of 2000, it was a really cold winter in Central Florida, well, for Central Florida. It dipped into the 20s for about a week straight, and the company that I was working for sold through every mitten and every glove that they had in stock anywhere. And people were still clamoring because they were cold. They wanted to have something so there was a more comfortable experience for them. So the company did something that they tried to talk to customers in a different way. And they said, well, we might be out of traditional gloves and traditional mittens, but we have fingerless mittens. That's right, we have fingerless mittens. And you can put these fingerless mittens on your hand and it'll keep your hands warm. And it was a great idea, but in the end, all that you had, it did solve a short-term issue. You okay there, Pepper? It did solve a short-term issue of people's hands being cold, but you had a bunch of people walking around wearing socks on their hands. It didn't make them gloves. It just helped narrow the gap between what we had and what people needed. They had socks. They didn't have mittens. They didn't have gloves. They just had socks. And that's always stuck with me about how silly it was that we couldn't order enough product to be able to help satisfy the actual need, but we did come up with a creative solution to help some people out. We convinced people to pay $9 to wear socks to keep their hands warm. Silly. It's the same thing that's happening right now with the difference between orientation and onboarding. We have companies charging thousands of dollars claiming to be an onboarding service when what they are is a digital orientation service. They're helping orient employees to the systems, to the processes, and to the physicality of their workplace. They're helping people get the initial training that they need. They're helping people get the initial accesses that they need. They're helping make the transition into a job from a process standpoint highly effective. But what they're not doing is finding a way to build relationships between two individuals. Because even as you digitize an orientation process, the one thing you're taking out of that is the conversation and the relationship between two individuals that are going to be working side by side that need to come together. Happy birthday there, Alex. How you doing, buddy? Or happy Friday. No, very funny. We need to go find a taxi driver to throw snowballs at, I believe. However, what I was saying about orientation and onboarding, two very different processes. The relationship that's missing is crucial to helping people identify with the company, get invested in that company, get invested in their jobs. Almost a third of people that start a new job quit within 90 days. And we talked yesterday about what it's like to have an employee that quits but doesn't leave. Those employees that you're churning and burning through because they've joined a company and then they realize it's the wrong job for them, it's the wrong fit for them. Some of that is due to the fact that we're not helping onboard them into the culture and into the team in a way that they feel personally connected to one another. There's no sense of togetherness and culture. So just because you want to call something one thing doesn't mean that it actually is that thing. Just because the boots are in the oven, it don't make them biscuits. If you want to bring new people into your organization, don't confuse orientation with onboarding. They're two different things. They work together, just like socks can be fingerless mittens. They might solve a short-term process, but confusing them in the long term is just going to leave you walking around wondering why I'm wearing socks on my hands. Have a good night, folks. Stay warm, everyone.